Welcome to A.U.M. Ask Us Marketing. I'm your host, Callie Fedesinko of Callie Collective. We are a digital marketing agency designed to build relationships between financial advisors and their target audience through data-driven content, websites, and advertising. You can learn more about us at the QR below, and you could get our email by using the QR above. Our episode today is brought to you by the Financial Planning Association, otherwise known as the FPA. The FPA is a great resource center providing education, support, and networking opportunities for financial advisors like you. So, it will be 2 years this new November since the SEC's marketing rule went into effect. That's 2 years that testimonials have been allowed. Yet, adoption rate has been slow. Many, including myself, find the rule vague and unclear. And who wants to pioneer an initiative when the penalty is civil or criminal action brought by the federal or state government? That's why we're bringing back Andrew Shedlock to shed some light on the specificities of the rule and how you can take advantage of this game-changing opportunity without the liability. So welcome with me, Andrew Shedlock.
Good afternoon, Callie. Thank you for having me again.
How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to talk about testimonials. And just fair warning, I can hear some talking outside of my window, and there's a good chance my dog is going to bark. So
No worries.
So speaking of testimonials, can you give us an overview of what advisors can do now?
Sure. So there are a lot of new developments in the marketing and testimonial space. As you mentioned, 2 years ago, the new marketing rule took effect. And so what happened is that a lot of advisors and planners had to comply with this new rule. And what happened is that caused a lot of confusion because there was a lot of ramp up time to the new rule coming on, and there were a lot of issues with vagueness and examples, things like that. What advisors can do now is they can use testimonials. And the one thing I would really recommend before I really get started into the substance of my remarks is to say, anything I say here is for educational purposes. Before you engage in testimonials, Google reviews, advertisements, of course, consult with your own attorney, call someone like myself, call your compliance consultant to figure out, because the last thing we need is for one of your clients or anyone listening to be the first test case of SEC's new Google review policy about testimonials. So the great thing about this rule is that even though it's so complicated and complex, there are so many free resources out there. Every compliance consultant will be schooled on it, and every attorney in the security space, like myself and others, will be able to guide you through the process. And what I like to think of the marketing rule as when it relates to testimonials is simply this. It's choose your own adventure. If you want to engage in advertisements, you have to do X, Y, and Z. If you want to use client testimonials, you have to do A, B, and C. There's no wrong path to choose. The only rule is don't do A, B, and C when you should do X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
So you talked a little bit about testimonials. So what can advisors do with testimonials? Well, first and foremost, advisors can use and should use their clients' testimonials. And we'll get into that in our discussion of what that looks like, I'm sure later. But, the adoption rate, like you said, is so low because for so long, advisors couldn't solicit the testimony and endorsements of third parties and the testimonies of their clients. Now they can. So it's really a whole new world for advisors, not only in marketing, but just opportunities to, win clients for free.
Right. So I'm going to just jump into some of my questions here.
Sure.
Starting with, can an advisor use any of the following? Because originally I thought that they couldn't, and now I think maybe they can. So can you do a LinkedIn recommendation or endorsement feature?
That's a really tough question. And what I will say is the SEC, to my knowledge, hasn't had an enforcement action on LinkedIn recommendation features. So could an advisor do that? Yes. Is it scary to do
Uh,
that? And does it require compliance? Also, yes. I mean, that sounds like an advertisement
right.
with
Okay.
communication disseminated to more than one person. Do we see
Mm.
advisors really doing that a lot? No. And
Mhm.
I think that's because the requirements are stringent and the benefit is probably lower than we think. So that's
Yeah.
probably one to, could you do it? Yes. Do you want to be the first one to try and do it? Probably not.
Yeah. Okay. What about Facebook ratings and reviews?
So when we talk about Facebook ratings and reviews, I mean it's very
Mhm.
similar to LinkedIn. Again, the SEC, to my knowledge, hasn't come down with any enforcement activities or actions that
Sure.
will allow us to judge that yet. So do you want to be the first one? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. Could you do it with the right compliance, like calling your compliance attorney, calling your consultant? Of course you can.
Mm.
Now, that being said, there's serious risks there because
Mm.
you're asking for something that isn't well defined in the rule. And I
Mhm.
think the reason most advisors don't do that is twofold. One, they probably don't need to. And two, the benefits of doing so at the
Right.
expense of action or client conversion is probably low. So something you probably want to steer away from unless you're looking to, be aggressive and accept the risk. And again, it's not something you need to do or
Mhm.
could do before calling your attorney, calling your compliance consultant.
What about Google, Yelp, Angie's List, or Nextdoor?
Yeah, and those are a little different because we have a
Okay.
little more guidance from the SEC on that space. Again, there's been no enforcement in this
Mm.
area yet.
Mhm.
I fully expect the SEC to, publish some more guidance, hopefully not some enforcement actions on advisors who have used or solicited Google reviews. What
Mm.
I can say about specifically Google reviews is this: if you're going to ask some clients for Google reviews, you need to
Mhm.
ask all your clients.
Okay.
Because if you're soliciting testimonials from your clients, you can't cherry pick. I think
Yes.
this is one of the clearest things. You can't cherry pick. You can't say
Right.
client A, B, and C with, over $1 million in A.U.M. who I've been with for 10 years. Can you pop some testimonials into these Google reviews and drive up my ratings? While
Mhm.
you have a bunch of other clients who haven't been with you as long, or maybe they're not
Right.
happy. You can't do that. So what do advisors do? They
Yeah.
send out requests for testimonials or Google reviews after each meeting,
Mhm.
or in a monthly newsletter, or at the end of the year. But whatever you do, make sure it's consistent because we don't want the SEC to say you're cherry picking.
Right. And I'm gonna come back to cherry picking because that's where most of my questions are.
Yep.
Um, but while we're still talking about Google reviews, if I well, one, can I respond to them? And if I do I have to respond to all of them?
Well, here's the thing. Can you respond to a Google review? Yes,
Mhm.
of course you can. Should you? You should not.
Okay.
Advisors should not respond to Google reviews, in my opinion,
Sure.
because
Okay.
if you do respond to one, you should probably respond to all of them. And
Mhm.
again, we're in this uncharted territory,
Right.
uncharted water. You don't want to be the advisor that's just starting out or
Yeah.
that has a great name and you responded to three Google reviews and the other 30 go unresponded to. So general
Mhm.
advice seems to be, hey, customer A says great job, customer B says great job, customer C says you're lousy. Well, you're stuck with customer C's review. If you engage with customer C and say, "Hey, I'm sorry about that. What can we
Mhm.
do to make it better?" and you
Mhm.
leave that on a Google review page,
Mhm.
that could blur the lines from entanglement to adoption of that testimonial. So your
Mm.
client is giving you, feedback. If
Mhm.
you respond to that, that could be a line between engagement or entanglement and adoption. Entanglement's a little
Okay.
more acceptable. Adoption comes with disclosures about compensation, material
Hmm.
conflicts of interest, obviously not lying about things like that. So
Yeah.
my general recommendation is just let it slide.
Okay. What if it's not a client who has left a comment? Would it be appropriate to respond? I mean, I don't know exactly what you would say. But could you say something showing that they're not actually a client?
You could. I mean, that's a different situation. I mean, you haven't solicited that testimonial.
Yeah.
Now, is that an endorsement? Because endorsements come from non-clients generally.
Mm.
So
Okay.
is that an endorsement? If someone says, you stink, Joe Blow, can you say, hey, Joe Blow, you're not my client? I mean, you could.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that cross the line from entanglement to adoption? I don't know, maybe, but
Yeah.
that kind of conduct will be looked upon a little more, or should be, hopefully,
Yeah.
depending on the current iteration of the SEC, a little more favorably than adopting,
Yeah.
reviews of good or bad clients.
So, okay, before I get to the cherry picking, you mentioned a few times like, well, there hasn't been any like legal lawsuits on that yet. But if we all keep waiting for somebody to have a lawsuit, nobody's ever going to do it. Is there any sort of will the SEC ever come forward before a lawsuit and be like, "Hey, do this or don't do this." So we're not all just waiting for the first person?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There are a few things. The SEC does issue, clarifications or notices about rules from time to time. I wouldn't
Okay.
expect that here. What we
Mm,
have seen is in the marketing rule itself, the
mhm.
whole hundreds of pages of monstrosity of rules. There was guidance around things like Google reviews.
Okay.
It didn't say Google reviews are acceptable, but it did say about online comments and things like that. So we
Got
do have
it.
a little more there.
Okay.
There also is a process sometimes, then this process is kind of faded by the wayside recently, but you can request a no action letter from the SEC sometimes. I
Hmm.
don't think this kind of thing rises to that level, but um,
Right.
I do think we're going to see a wave of advisors getting more and more aggressive with
Mm,
testimonials and advertisements and endorsements because, again, you couldn't do them. There's a new generation who
right.
stares at their phones and computer screens all the
Oh
time.
my
I mean,
gosh,
that's
yes.
us. So people are going to say, why can't I have my client record a testimonial and throw it on my website? You can, but there
Right.
are rules to follow.
Right. All right, let's get to cherry picking because I know we've got a hard stop at 12:27.
Perfect.
um okay. So the cherry picking seems to be the hardest part of the rule for me as a marketer, right? So the first thing is, can I ask select clients to do a video testimonial if I have a disclosure at the end, or do I still need to ask everybody?
Well, you should ask all your clients to do testimonials
Okay.
if they want to. Your disclosure always has to be there, whether this
Okay.
person was compensated, whether they're a current or former client, and whether there are any material conflicts of interest. So again, best practice, ask
Yeah.
all your clients. The response rate from your clients is probably going to be pretty low,
Mhm.
but your best clients, probably could ask you for it. So again, it's the cherry picking. It's how does that line move from testimonial to endorsement? You want to stay in
Right.
the testimonial, or excuse me, how does it move from a testimonial, a permissible testimonial action to
Mhm.
more of an advertisement? You want to stay in the testimonial space because those
Mm.
disclosures are a little more straightforward.
Okay.
Advertisements, obviously, if you're adopting the testimonial of your
Mhm.
client and putting it on your web page,
Yeah.
that statement has to be free from lies, from material omissions, and things like that, which is the standard for forever. But
Right.
that's a thing where any consultant, any compliance consultant, any attorney will be able to run that through you very quickly.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. We seem to be focused on SEC registered firms. Does the same guidance apply to state registered firms?
That's a good question. And the answer to that is generally no, because state registered firms will have
Mhm.
their own rules. Now, are states like Minnesota, Tennessee, Colorado, do they have the same type of detailed marketing rule that the SEC published?
Mhm.
No, probably not. A lot of
Okay.
states don't have guidance around this. So
Mm.
it's a little tricky when you're trying
Mhm.
to figure out what should I follow. I mean,
Right.
this is where an attorney is worth their weight because
Yeah.
they can dive into Minnesota, Colorado, Florida law and figure out what can I say in that sense. But no,
Mhm.
the SEC rules, of course, don't apply to state registered advisors, but a lot of states do look to model some rules around, around what the SEC does for
Right.
uniformity.
Okay.
That's a good question that comes up just because so many people starting in the business, so many people,
Mhm.
coming up through the ranks. I mean, have an AUM that's not quite at the 90 to 100 million range,
Right.
and you're like, well, what do I do? I mean,
Yeah.
it's great practice to apply the SEC rules, but that doesn't mean you're complying with the state rules.
Right. So back to the cherry picking. Can I okay, I've got a website and I've asked all my clients for a review. And maybe I have, I don't know, 100. They're on Google and then I put them on my website. Well, on my homepage, I just want to show one or three and then link back to all of the testimonials. Is that okay to do, or do I have to have massive disclosures on the homepage about, hey, we have other testimonials? Or maybe I can't even say that. Like, what's the guidance there?
Yeah, well, the guidance, I mean, obviously it's tricky because, you don't want to be seen as just picking the best reviews, but then again, you're not going to put, this person's a terrible advisor and lost
Right.
thousands of dollars for me on your website. So, I mean, the disclosures are important. I mean, I don't think there's a requirement to list all of your testimonials, positive or negative, that you
Hmm.
adopt. Again, now we're talking about entanglement versus adoption. If you
What
adopt it,
is entanglement versus adoption?
so entanglement is, in a very loose sense,
Yeah.
not saying this is the legal definition, but entanglement, you solicit Google reviews from your clients. Your clients leave Google reviews. I mean, the fact that they left Google reviews because you asked them to, you're entangled with that. If you
Mm.
then adopt those Google reviews as advertisements, as testimonials that you put on your website, you're then
Mm.
taking that from another site and putting it on your marketing material. I mean, arguably,
Interesting.
yeah, arguably that's a testimonial. It's an advertisement. It has to comply with, um, the marketing rule, of course, but it has to
Right.
comply with, you know, not being bold-faced lies, not omitting material facts, being free of material conflicts, things like that. And
Yeah.
so that's a line of adoption when we're talking about what to place on our website. That's when the disclosures are really important. So, I mean,
Mm.
draft up your website,
Mhm.
adopt the material disclosures there, run it through
Mhm.
your compliance consultant, run it through your attorney before you even think about pushing publish.
Yeah.
Because something that I want your listeners to know is that
Yeah.
on September 9th, I mean, we're talking what, 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
SEC came down hard on, 9 SEC
Mm.
registered investment advisors. And this
Mhm.
was really just another marketing sweep. And they said, hey, SEC investment advisor, you said you were endorsed by this athletic association. Guess
Mm.
what? That association doesn't exist.
Mm.
You said, well, we were rated the top wealth management firm in 20, by whatever company. Well,
Mhm.
you didn't specify what years that rating was for. Some of those
Mm.
ratings were for 2022 or
Right.
2017. It makes it sound like, you're endorsed by them now.
Right.
And so it would not surprise me for the SEC to come out with more and more of these actions. Really, really what they're doing is picking apart
Mhm.
advisors' websites. They're
Mhm.
saying, you have the wealth management logo up here. You said you were
Mhm.
endorsed by them. That was from 2014. That's
Right.
misleading your clients because that makes it sound like you were endorsed now. It's
Yeah.
okay to have, you know, indications that this group endorsed you in 2014. You just have to tell your clients that this is from 2014.
Mm.
And so that's when it comes to testimonials too.
Right.
It's really like you got to tell your customers and your clients what, who is this person? Are they a current client? Are they a former client? Are there any
Right.
conflicts? Were they paid for this?
Okay. So another question from the audience, back to the state registered. Would you say SEC rules are typically stricter or looser than state rules?
One of the things I would say about that is that SEC rules are usually much more defined than state rules, and
Mm.
the regulators enforcing them are much more professional and organized.
Yeah.
State rules are not necessarily looser. They're generally going to be far less detailed because
Mm.
they apply to a smaller subset of people. So
Okay.
you're going to get less guidance, and
Right.
the regulators enforcing them may not be as familiar
Mm.
with those rules as the SEC is with their rules. So
Yeah.
again, you're probably going to find a lot of what I call open space in state rules.
Mhm.
If we're talking about the marketing rule, I mean, the only thing you may get from a state rule is don't lie, don't
Mm,
omit material facts, things like that.
right. Okay. Okay. So if I am asking all of my clients for a review, and maybe I'm doing it when they have meetings with me, I'm not doing my meetings all at the same time. Is it okay that I've asked at different times? Like if my first client gives me a review and then maybe for whatever reason SEC reviews my site and then they're like, "Hey, you didn't ask everybody." Do I need to have proof that I was going to ask at the next meeting?
That certainly would not hurt. I mean,
Yeah.
this is where your policies and procedures come into place. I mean, that's
Mm,
something we haven't talked about yet. I mean, a lot of advisors, once this new marketing rule took effect, called their compliance consultants and attorneys and said, I need to update my policies and procedures. And
mm,
the compliance consultant gave them some updates, but not all of the updates. So you need to look first to your policies and procedures. And there should be
okay.
a testimonial section in your policies and procedures that addresses something like that. If we are
Yeah.
soliciting testimonials, we do it, every quarter, or we do it in our monthly newsletter, or we do it after every meeting.
Mhm.
And then not only do you have to say that, but you have to follow up
Right.
because as a litigation attorney who's litigated with the SEC
Yeah.
and represented clients, one thing I see is your policy and procedure can say all the right things, but if you have no proof that you actually followed them, what's the point? And
Right.
I see a lot in my clients. I mean, consultants, other attorneys came through, added a few paragraphs that are great, but they
Mhm.
don't cover everything you need. And so,
Mhm.
yes, you can absolutely ask all your clients for testimonials after every meeting. Yes, you
Yeah.
should have that documented, and yes, you should follow it.
So I have notes from last year that and maybe it's not a review, it's an endorsement. A COI can leave a review slash endorse you, but only as an individual, not as a company. Is that accurate?
I'm not too sure on that. I know I tried
Okay.
tried to look into that a little bit. Obviously, endorsements come from not current clients,
Okay.
and so endorsements take a little different spin than testimonials because
Yeah.
endorsements have to disclose when was the endorsement given, what period of rating does it
Mhm.
cover, things
Mhm.
like that. And so, companies of course can endorse and leave
Mhm.
endorsements on advisors' websites. Like the
Okay.
Alliance of Nurses endorses Joe
Right.
Schmo Financial Planning. That's fine, but that's not going to be enough. I mean, you need to
Mhm.
document, was this person paid for their endorsement? They're currently not a client.
Mhm.
What do they endorse them just every year, every quarter? I mean, what goes on here? So
I'm kind of surprised the testimonials rule doesn't include that because I mean, I could be a client and left a testimonial 5 years ago. Well, not 5 because we couldn't have them, but 2 years ago, and maybe I feel completely different now. I'm surprised we don't have to have like a date on there.
you could, yeah, it's a little different. I mean, it's something that could be a change or something, but I think it comes down to the fact of, your testimonials, those things you adopt as
Mhm.
advertisements, they can't be untrue.
Mm,
They can't omit material information. And if you know your client's opinion of you has changed or is outdated, I
right.
mean, the SEC could say, hey, this person was happy in, February of 2020, and they
Right.
were unhappy in April of 2020 after the market crash. So
Yeah. Right.
something like that.
Okay. What about awards? I know we briefly talked about them, and it sounds like having the dates is very important. But it's always kind of before the rule was passed, it was kind of like a sticky subject of could I say I won this award or not because it's considered an endorsement, and we weren't allowed to have endorsements. But that's like off the table now. So can we post on social media if you've won an award? Or put it on your website or in your email.
Yes, you can with the proper disclosures. As I
Okay.
mentioned in those September 9th,
Yeah.
2024 enforcement orders, I mean, the SEC picked apart 9 advisors. Heck,
Mm,
contact me, I'll send them to you. They're easy to find.
mhm.
But again, if you have a wealth management award or an endorsement from 2016, and you're not telling your clients somewhere clearly and conspicuously on your webpage that this
Mm.
award was from 2016,
Yeah.
the SEC is likely to come down hard on you. And I think
Right.
that the whole marketing rule is about clear, transparent, clearly and prominently disclosed, because the whole marketing role is about let's give investors all the information they need to make a decision.
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
an award from 2011 carries a lot different weight than an award from 2023.
Right. Okay. So you've mentioned how important consultants would be. Is that something that you offer?
I help consultants. I don't do the day-to-day compliance that other
Yeah.
great consultants do. I can send your clients the names of some consultants as needed, but really it's a team involvement. It's what I
Mm.
see a lot is the advisor wants to do X. They
Mhm.
want to work with someone like yourself who has a great rate of return for advisors to
Right.
do Y. So we want to do this. Okay, let's clear this with our attorney. Let's
Mm.
finalize everything. So I wouldn't be involved necessarily in the day-to-day minutia drafting, but really
Yeah.
more of a compliance perspective. And I think it's a team effort because we've worked with consultants who miss something, and
Right.
consultants have worked with people like, we've missed things too. And so you really can't afford not to spend, the $5,000 it would take to get it right and
Mhm.
not face the backlash of the SEC on the backside.
What about some of the software that's out there? I'm you probably can't answer this, but I'm assuming that they're working with attorneys, uh, since they're marketing it as advisor-specific review software.
Yeah, they should be. I know there's a couple of software companies
Yeah.
out there that do that say they are. And again, they should be working with not only attorneys, but compliance consultants. I mean, so many people have mapped out this rule that again,
Yeah.
it's a waterfall. Pick your path. If you
Right.
want to do X, you have to do Y and Z. If you want to do B, you have to do C and D.
Mhm.
So it's hard to read in one sitting and figure out what you want to do, but if you sit down with the right people, you can do it.
Right. All right, as we're coming to close, and this is I know it's, like, gonna be a detailed answer, if you
Yep.
can give one, but if we were going to provide a checklist to advisors, what should what should be included? What should they do and what should they not do?
So the first thing you should do is work with your consultant and attorney. Say, I
Mm.
want to do X. So your
Mhm.
consultant and attorney will tell you that. Then you have to figure out, is this a testimonial or an endorsement?
Mhm.
And you need to know what those two different things are. Current clients versus not current clients.
Yeah.
And then I think you have to figure out, if I make these statements, what are my disclosure obligations then? Again,
Mm.
endorsements have to have disclosures, testimonials have to have disclosures. And that's a super simplified way of doing that. But just remember, the SEC's rule is for more information to investors. That is better for investors. More information requires more disclosures.
Of course. This was great and very helpful. So thank you so much, Andrew, for
Absolutely.
coming on here today and sharing with us uh, what we should and shouldn't do.
No, I appreciate it, Callie. Thank you so much.
Yes, it was awesome. Okay, so speaking of testimonials and new things that you can do, find out if what your marketing strengths are and what your next steps are with our quiz. You can scan the QR code that's covering half of my face, or you can scan the QR code that's above. And then lastly, please join us next Monday as we talk with Angela and Elise about event planning and the event essentials that you should be incorporating just in time for holiday planning.